Hello everyone, welcome to another video. Philip here, and we're gonna do some book reviews today of the books that I've been reading on July 2018. It's hot like hell in Portugal on these couple of days, so I'm recording this like at 5 a.m. on the first light of dawn before it gets hot like hell. So yeah, books. One that I actually read in June, but I forgot to mention on the previous video that I did. It's called The Guardians of the Louvre. You have the Portuguese version. It's by Jiro Taniguchi, a Japanese guy, and it was ordered by the guys from the Louvre for a special exhibition. And it's an interesting book. It's drawn in the Franco-Belgian school of drawing, but has a lot of manga influences in it because the guy is French. The guy is Japanese. And it's the story of a visitor who meets some spirits in the Louvre when he's visiting, which tells him a little bit of the story of the Louvre, of the Museum of the Louvre in Paris. So it was ordered by the museum itself. It was released by the Louvre editions. You can see it down here. And it's an interesting read. It's good it helps you know a little bit more of the history behind the Louvre, or some parts of it, or some authors of it. Overall, it didn't really convince me much as the read. It didn't feel very cohesive. But I don't know, if you're interested in the history of the Louvre, this is an interesting way of learning a bit more about it. And the drawings are good. The quality of the art is pretty decent. So yeah, but overall I only give it 3 stars because it didn't convince me as the plot. It felt too forced into a story of some sorts. So yeah, that's the only problem I had with it. Other than that, it's pretty good, and it has the curiosity that despite being released in Europe, it still reads like manga from left to right. So it has the reverse order of reading like they do it in Japan. So yeah, Guardians of the Louvre. Then after that, I picked up the Sandman Overture by Neil Gaiman, and with drawings by J.H. Williams III and Dave Stewart. And this was really good. I really loved the original Sandman. I read it a few months back, and I picked this one up because it's the continuation of the Sandman, and it doesn't disappoint. It's really good. There are some parts here that are even better than the original. It was made a few years afterwards, so it's normal that some parts are better, but I mean, the drawing quality on some of these pages is it's mind-blowing. I'm gonna try to find something in particular to show you guys. I guess this one is good. It's like the ending of one of the chapters and the starting of the other one. And there are some small interviews in the end with the authors as well that really explain a little bit of how the book was made and the details of it, and it's really good. I really enjoyed reading it. Sandman Overture, have to recommend it. It's Gaiman, you know I'm a Gaiman junkie. And curiously enough, I then picked up another comic. I'm just realizing that I made a mistake on a previous video. I said that J.H. Williams III had drawn this, the White Lama. And it wasn't him, it was George Best, it says here. It's written by Jodorowsky, but it's drawn by Best, and I thought that it was J.H. Williams III, who later collaborated with something with Alan Moore, which I have been pitching as the wrong source of why I picked that up. Anyways, doesn't matter. Sidetracking. The White Lama. Really good, very thick book, all very well drawn. I can show a few things here. So the quality of the drawings is very good, the story is very good. Jodorowsky, I mean, Jodorowsky has a lot of background behind him. He's a very famous author. He draws as well, but in this particular volume he was just the writer. But Georges Best is very good drawing as well, and he draws in a very similar style to Jodorowsky. He follows the French-Belgium school of drawing. He wasn't very famous when he did this because he was like an immigrant to Sweden, I believe, from what I read in the background, but he really draws very well and he really brought this to life. And it's the story of a young boy of some sort who is not Asian. He's white, hence the title, the White Lama, which ends up in a journey of self-discovery in Tibet. And there's a lot of politics of Tibet, a lot of mysticism from Tibet involved. It becomes a bit surrealist, psychedelic kind of thing, but it's all pretty much the quest for the holy enlightenment, for the Buddha enlightenment state of some sort, and how a guy from the western part of civilization could make his way inside that mindset and achieve that state that the more eastern countries are more famous for, or some people in the eastern countries. I really loved the reading, was very good, highly recommend it, very interesting, and yeah, don't remember if I give it 4 or 5 stars, but I give it a good rating. Next up, I picked up Alan Moore's The Swamp Thing, and yeah, Alan Moore is a very famous author. I checked out his work on Watchmen. I checked out V for Vendetta. Both of them were really, really good. So I was very curious to see the Swamp Thing. This was revered as one of the seminal Swamp Thing revivals. I was a bit disappointed, to tell the truth. The drawings are all right, but it's in the style of those old comics. The paper of the publishing is like journal paper, which gives a feeling for the original comics age that this was originally developed on. But I don't know, it feels a bit dated. The stories themselves feel like they forced the superhuman kind of thing, so the superhero kind of thing, and also terror and some themes. Well, if you like traditional comics, this is interesting. I'm a bit past those traditional comics, so it wasn't that interesting for me. I think I only give it 3 stars, but the writing is really good. I mean, Alan Moore itself, he picked up a character that was just existing in those style of comics, and he really gave it a certain depth that it wasn't common in the comic world of the time. So there was still a lot of ground to cover until it doesn't feel as cliche and tacky as you would expect from comics, but this was a good step in the right direction. It's just not very interesting to read anymore for me, but I mean, if you like comics, or if you like Swamp Thing, or if you like Alan Moore, you might enjoy this and find some value in it. I mean, I find some value in it for safekeeping. I won't get rid of the book, but it's not something I would read again and again, which I would do, for example, with The Watchmen. I would read The Watchmen again because it's really good and worth remembering. Anyways, more books that I read. I picked up this small one, The Nose by Nikolai Gogol. Christina, my girlfriend, had recommended it to me a few times. She said she really laughed a lot about it. It's a funny book. It has some interesting passages. It's written by a Russian guy from 1800s, I think. Born 1809 and died 1852, so early 17th century. And it tells the tale, or it explains with some sarcasm how the new nobles of military grade or military relations in Russia came to become part of the elitist part of Russian society. They made their names in the military, and then suddenly, when the war was not raging, they were part of this elite society, and they didn't know very well how to behave themselves. And this book has two short stories that really makes fun of that, critiques it a little bit. So it's interesting to discover that aspect of the Russian society at the time. Doesn't really translate much into nowadays, but it's still a curious read and well written, so props to that. But it didn't really spark any fires within me. Not sure on the rating I give it, probably 3 stars, maybe 4, I'm not sure. But yeah, it's a cool read. If you like more classical stuff, this is a nice little short read to pick up. Then I've been meaning to read this for a very long time. This is Frank Herbert's Dune. I finally picked it up. I couldn't stop reading it. I think I read it all in like 2 weeks or something. Very good. I kept imagining stuff from the video game and the movie a lot. I hear there is a remake of the movie planned to come out in 1 year or 2 years time. Afterwards, I also checked out, and there was a miniseries at some point in the year 2000 of Dune, which I never saw, and from the screenshots, I think I never will. But I really loved the writing on this. It's really well written. It has a lot of interesting parallels with, first, the whole world was well thought out and very well defined. It really gets you immersive in it. It's a whole new thing to discover, new languages, new ways of conduct. So very interesting in that aspect. And then it traces some parallels to Earth and how things are ruled in Earth and the power of houses and how houses, secret societies, religion, a lot of different themes are put together into this book, and it really works very well. I really loved the storyline, the characters, how it developed. The ending was a bit, well, it was a forced climax because you need to end the big book with a big climax, obviously. I don't know how it will evolve into such a large saga of other books as it clearly has. So I'm very curious to read the following volumes. I realized I didn't have number 2 and number 3, but that's good because number 2 also being released in this 50th anniversary re-release cover recently. So I managed to snag that one. Should arrive in the mail probably today even, hasn't arrived yet. So I'm curious to keep reading Dune with following up. I think the next one is called The Messiah of Dune. Dune Messiah, yeah. So yeah, really good read, highly recommended. I think I gave it 5 stars, either 5 or 4, probably 5. I think it's worth 5. So yeah, Dune from Frank Herbert. Then I had a challenge to read this book called Sharp Objects by Gillian Flynn. This was voted on one of the videos that me and Christina do with our channel Books and Beers. We gave some books away, and in reply, some of our viewers got to decide which book we would read as a thriller between like a list of 6, which one they would like us to read, and this one won, Sharp Objects. So I started reading it before the voting even ended because I already saw that the results were tending towards this book, and I just finished it a couple days ago. It's an interesting read. The story itself is a little creepy. It's the story of a dysfunctional family from Missouri, from a little town, and it's told by the viewpoint of this woman who is now a reporter. And as the story progresses, you figure out that she has a few dysfunctions and that they are pretty much coming from her dysfunctional family and the dysfunctional town. And I don't want to spoil the story itself, so I will leave it at that. But it's an interesting thriller. I enjoyed the story. I think the writing could have been better. The beginning didn't really convince me because the characters didn't feel like they had enough depth. They felt too shallow. And then the storyline started progressing and the characters started unraveling a little bit more, and it was more interesting, but then it got to the point where it stopped being believable. So I had a little trouble with the book in that regard, but I mean, it didn't stop me from reading it. It wasn't like a big hassle to read. It reads itself very easily, and it's a good read. It's an interesting story, not very believable, but overall it was an interesting read, and it can make you think about a few things like bullying and dysfunctional families, as already was mentioned before, and a lot of different things. So yeah, interesting read, recommend it. Yeah, that's it. The last book that I've been reading recently is The Dream Hunters by Neil Gaiman and Craig Russell. This is the comic book adaptation. I just recently realized that there is another version of this, which was just with illustrations by a Japanese illustrator. I have the comic book. I read the comic book. It's a good story, well drawn. So good follow up to Sandman. This, in terms of timeline, this story is between the original 8 volumes of Sandman and Sandman Overtures. So it's nice to follow it up. There is still one more Sandman that I still have to read, which I already have ordered, which is Stories of the Endless, I think. Something like that. Which is one story of each of the elements of each of the brothers and sisters of the Endless. Anyways, Dream Hunters, I recommend it. I give it a 4 stars out of 5. It has an Asian setting to it, but it's completely inside the Sandman universe. A lot of appearances from Sandman, and it really follows well and is in tune with the previous stories that you would read on all the other Sandman. So really good read. I really enjoyed it. So yeah, that's it for this video. Hope you guys enjoyed, learned of a few new books or interesting books, or my opinion of the books. And if you guys have any similar recommendations or any comments at all whatsoever, feel free to put them on the comment box below. Otherwise, see you next video. Bye bye everyone. Take care.